They laughed when she bled on the marble floor. They laughed harder when the alpha she'd loved spat at her feet and called her disposable. But Alara Vance didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stood there, in the wreckage of her dignity, while an entire pack celebrated her humiliation like a festival sport. That night, something in her chest went cold and sharp. Not despair, but clarity. She'd spent 23 years invisible. 23 years waiting for permission to matter. No more. Before you find out how the forgotten Omega became the most feared queen in the Borderlands, hit that like button, drop your city in the comments, and buckle up, because this story gets wild. The Harvest Moon Gathering was supposed to be sacred. At least that's what the elders claimed every year when they lined the Grand Hall with wildflowers and elk antlers, when they roasted whole boars over fire pits, and filled clay jugs with blackberry wine, strong enough to make grown wolves howl. For the Shadow Ridge Pack, it was tradition, a night to celebrate survival, to honor the hunt, to remind everyone that winter was coming and only the strong would see spring. Alara Vance had always hated it, not because of the food or the music or even the mandatory dancing that made her feet ache for days. She hated it because the Harvest Gathering was a performance, a glittering stage where everyone played their part. The alphas strutted and postured, the betas networked and schemed, and the omegas? They smiled and served and stayed quiet, grateful for scraps of attention from wolves who'd forget their names by morning. She'd learned that lesson early. Tonight, though, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the autumn wind hissed through the pines like a warning. Maybe it was the tightness in her chest that hadn't eased since she'd woken up that morning. Or maybe, probably, it was the fact that Caden Thorne had been staring at her all evening with a look she couldn't decipher. Caden. The name still made her stomach twist. He stood across the hall now, firelight catching the sharp angles of his face, his dark hair pulled back in that careless way that somehow looked effortless. He wore his formal leathers, black with silver buckles, tailored to show off the broad shoulders and lean strength that came with being born alpha. Everything about him screamed power, command, control. And once, stupidly, she'd thought he'd seen something in her. "Stop staring," hissed Mira, her only real friend in this forsaken place. The older Omega elbowed Alara hard enough to bruise. "You look desperate." "I'm not staring." "You absolutely are. And so is half the room." Mira's voice dropped lower, urgent. "Listen to me, El. Whatever you think is happening between you two, it's not. He's going to announce his bonding tonight. Everyone knows it." Alara's throat tightened. "That's a rumor." "It's a fact. Helena's been flaunting that sapphire cuff all week, the one his mother gave her." Mira grabbed her wrist, fingers cold and insistent. "I know you think you're special to him. I know he's been kind to you. But kindness isn't love, and it sure as hell isn't a bond. You're setting yourself up for a fall." "I'm not expecting anything." "Then why do you look like you're about to cry?" Alara jerked her arm free and turned away, blinking hard. The hall spun around her, too bright, too loud, too full of people who'd never once looked at her like she mattered. Laughter echoed off the stone walls. Somewhere, a fiddle started up, shrill and manic. The scent of roasted meat and pine smoke clogged her lungs. She shouldn't have come. But Omegas didn't get to skip the Harvest Gathering. Absence was noticed. Absence was punished. So she'd put on her nicest dress, a simple gray thing she'd mended 3 times, and braided her hair and told herself it would be fine. Just one night. Just a few hours. Then she could go back to her cabin at the edge of the territory and pretend the world didn't exist. Except Caden kept looking at her. And despite everything Mira said, despite the knot of dread in her gut, a tiny, pathetic part of her still hoped. The hall was packed tonight. Nearly 300 wolves from Shadow Ridge and neighboring territories, all crammed into a space meant for half that number. The air was thick with competing scents, sweat, and alcohol, and the distinctive musk of wolves in close quarters. Tables sagged under platters of venison, rabbit, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. Children darted between adults' legs, shrieking with laughter. Near the main fire pit, a group of young alphas were arm wrestling, shouting encouragement and insults in equal measure. Alara stood near the back wall, partially hidden behind a carved wooden pillar. From here, she could see everything without being seen, a survival skill she'd perfected over the years. Mira hadn't left her side, which was both comforting and irritating. The older woman meant well, but her constant warnings were like salt in an open wound. You should eat something, Mira said, nudging a plate toward her. You look pale. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't been fine since he started paying attention to you. Mira's voice softened. I'm not trying to hurt you, Elle. I'm trying to protect you. I've seen this before. Alphas, especially ones like Caden, they don't bond omegas. They use them. He's not like that. They're all like that. Alara wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Because deep down, beneath the hope and the longing, she knew Mira was right. She'd always known. 2 years ago, when Caden had first approached her by the river, she'd been wary. Alphas didn't seek out omegas unless they wanted something. But he'd been different, gentle, curious. He'd asked about the herbs she was collecting, and when she'd explained their uses, he'd actually listened. Not the polite half-attention most wolves gave her, but genuine interest. He'd come back the next day, and the next. Over the following months, their meetings became routine. He'd find her in the forest or by the river, and they'd talk. About everything. About nothing. He told her about the pressure of being the alpha's son, the expectations that suffocated him. She told him about the loneliness of being invisible, of watching life happen around her without ever being part of it. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen, and somewhere along the way, she'd made the fatal mistake of falling for him. She'd known better, had told herself 1,000 times that it couldn't last, that alphas didn't bond omegas, that she was setting herself up for heartbreak. But knowing and feeling were two different things. Mira's hand on her arm jerked her back to the present. He's moving. Alara's gaze snapped to Caden. He was weaving through the crowd, heading toward the main platform where his father stood. Alpha Garrick Thorne was holding court with a cluster of visiting dignitaries, his massive frame radiating authority even in casual conversation. Caden climbed the steps to the platform. The hall quieted. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. No, she whispered. Not yet. I'm sorry, Mira said quietly. Alpha Garrick raised one scarred hand and the last remnants of conversation died. He surveyed the hall with the cold, calculating gaze of a predator assessing prey. Brothers, sisters, packmates. His voice was a rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Tonight, we honor the old ways. We honor the blood that binds us, the land that sustains us, and the bonds that keep us strong. Alara's hands clenched so hard her nails bit into her palms. As your alpha, it is my duty and privilege to ensure our pack's future, to forge alliances that will see us through the harsh winters ahead, to build strength that will protect our children and our children's children. Garrick's gaze swept the room. Tonight, my son, your future alpha, takes the first step toward that future. The applause started before Caden even stood. Enthusiastic, almost desperate. Everyone loved Caden. Everyone wanted to be near him, to bask in the reflected glory of his attention. Everyone except the Omega, who'd stupidly given him her heart. Caden stood, and the applause grew louder. He climbed the remaining steps to stand beside his father, and when he turned to face the crowd, his expression was calm, composed, the perfect air. His eyes found hers across the hall. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, she saw something flicker in his gaze. Regret, maybe, or guilt. Then it was gone, shuttered behind that polished mask. Thank you, Caden said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. I'm honored by your faith in me, in our pack, in our future. He paused, letting the moment build. Which is why I'm pleased, no, proud, to announce my bonding to Helena Grayson of the North March Pack. The hall erupted, cheers, applause, howls of celebration. Alara couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in her ears. Helena stood from her seat at the high table, graceful as a dancer. Her gown was deep sapphire silk that probably cost more than Alara would earn in a lifetime. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate style that showcased the sapphire cuff on her wrist, the Thorne family heirloom, given only to bonded mates. She glided to the platform like she'd been born for this moment, because she had been. She was everything an alpha's mate should be, beautiful, well-bred, politically connected. The alliance with the North March Pack would bring resources, territory, and prestige. Of course, Caden had chosen her. What else could Alara have expected? Helena reached the platform and took Caden's offered hand. They looked perfect together, like something out of a storybook. The handsome alpha and his elegant mate, ready to lead the pack into a glorious future. Alara's vision blurred. "Elle," Mira whispered urgently, Don't do anything. Just stay calm." But Alara wasn't calm. She was drowning. The walls were closing in, the air too thick, the noise too loud. Her chest felt like it was caving in, ribs splintering, heart imploding. She needed to leave, now. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loud against the stone floor. Heads turned. She didn't care. She just needed out. Needed air. Needed to be anywhere but here, watching the man she loved celebrate his future with someone else. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the startled looks and whispered comments. Her vision tunneled. All she could see was the door, the blessed promise of escape. "Alara." "No. No. No. No." "Alara, wait." Caden's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She should have kept walking, should have run. Instead, she stopped. The hall went silent. 300 wolves holding their collective breath, sensing drama, sensing blood. Alara turned slowly. Caden was pushing through the crowd toward her, leaving Helena standing alone on the platform. The future mate looked confused, her perfect smile faltering. "Alara," Caden said again, quieter now. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands flexed at his sides. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice came out steady, miraculously steady. "That you're bonding someone else? I got that part loud and clear. Congratulations." "It's not—" He glanced around at the watching faces, then lowered his voice. "This isn't about feelings. You know that. It's politics. My father arranged it months ago. The Grayson Alliance is crucial for—" "I don't care." "Yes, you do." He took a step closer, and she saw it then, the pleading in his eyes. Not remorse, not love. Just a desperate need for her to understand, to make this easy for him. "You know I care about you. That hasn't changed." "Care?" The word tasted like poison. "You care about me?" "Of course I do." "Then why did you lie?" His jaw tightened. "I never lied." "You courted me, Caden." Her voice was rising now, emotion cracking through. "For 2 years you sought me out. You talked to me. You made me think—" She swallowed hard. "You made me think I mattered. You do matter. Just not enough to bond. That's not fair." "Fair?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "You want to talk about fair? You're an alpha. You get to choose your future. You get to decide who's worthy. I'm just an omega. I don't get choices. I get used." The words echoed in the sudden silence. Caden's expression shifted. The pleading vanished, replaced by something harder, defensive. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" "Yes." He straightened to his full height, and suddenly the boy she'd known by the river was gone entirely. In his place stood the alpha heir, cold, controlled, untouchable. "I've been kind to you, Alara. I've spent time with you when I didn't have to. I've given you attention that most omegas would kill for. But that doesn't mean I owe you anything." The hall was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Someone near the back coughed. A child whimpered and was quickly shushed. Alara stared at Caden, at this stranger wearing a familiar face, and felt something inside her crack wide open. Not her heart. That had broken the moment he'd announced his bonding. This was something deeper, something fundamental. Her illusion. The illusion that she could ever be anything more than what she was born to be. That hard work or kindness or simply being herself could somehow bridge the gap between Omega and Alpha. That love could conquer hierarchy. It was all a lie. "You're right," she said quietly. "You don't owe me anything." She turned to leave, and that's when Helena laughed. It wasn't loud, just a soft, tinkling sound from the platform, amused and condescending. She leaned toward the woman beside her, some visiting beta from the North March delegation, and whispered something behind her hand. The beta laughed too. Then another, and another. The sound spread through the hall like wildfire. Not everyone joined in. Mira looked horrified, and several of the older Omegas had the decency to look uncomfortable, but enough people laughed that it felt like the entire world was mocking her. Did she actually think he'd bond her? Poor deluded thing. Omega's always overreach. Someone should have warned her. Probably why she's still unbonded at her age, too stupid to know her place. Alara stood frozen in the center of the hall, the laughter crashing over her like waves. Her face burned. Her hands trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to curl up and die somewhere no one would find her. But she didn't move. She just stood there, looking at Caden. He wasn't laughing. But he wasn't defending her either. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes averted, letting it happen, letting them destroy her. Enough. Alpha Garrick's voice cut through the laughter like a whip. The hall fell silent instantly. He stepped to the edge of the platform, his massive frame backlit by the fire. When his gaze landed on Alara, it was colder than winter. Omega, he said, the title an insult in his mouth. You have disrupted a sacred ceremony with your delusions. This behavior is unacceptable, embarrassing. You shame yourself and your station. Alara's nails bit into her palms. She didn't speak. Leave, Garrick continued. Now, before I have you removed. The threat hung in the air. Alara lifted her chin and met his gaze, held it. Then slowly, deliberately, she turned and walked toward the door. Her steps echoed in the silence. Every eye in the hall was on her. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their contempt boring into her back like knives. She didn't run, didn't cry, didn't give them the satisfaction. She walked out of that hall with her spine straight and her head high, even though every cell in her body was screaming. The cool night air hit her face like a slap. The sounds of the gathering faded behind her, music starting up again, conversation resuming, life moving on like she'd never existed. She walked past the fire pits where children played, past the clusters of wolves drinking and laughing, past the edges of the celebration, into the darkness beyond. And only then, when she was far enough away that no one could see, did she let herself break. The sob that tore from her throat was ragged and harsh. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying to stifle it, but more came. Great heaving gasps that bent her double, that made her ribs ache. She'd been so stupid, so desperate to believe that someone could see her as more than what she was born to be, that maybe, just maybe, the world could be different for her. But the world didn't change. It just chewed you up and spit you out and laughed while you bled. Eek. The walk back to her cabin took 20 minutes. It felt like hours. Alara moved through the forest on autopilot, her feet following familiar paths worn into the earth over years of solitary wandering. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light through the canopy. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Small creatures rustled in the underbrush. The forest had always been her refuge, the only place she felt even remotely at peace. Trees didn't judge, rivers didn't mock. The earth beneath her feet didn't care if she was Alpha or Omega or something in between. Her cabin appeared through the trees, a small, sturdy structure built from pine logs and river stones. She'd helped build it when she was 16, after her grandmother died and the pack made it clear she was on her own. It sat at the far edge of Shadow Ridge territory, isolated enough that she rarely saw other wolves, which was exactly how she liked it. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The single room was dark and cold. She didn't bother lighting a fire, just collapsed onto her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Mira's words echoed in her head. Kindness isn't love. No, it wasn't. Caden had never loved her. Maybe he'd enjoyed her company. Maybe he'd even cared about her in his own limited way. But love? Real, bonding, choosing you over everything love? That was for wolves like Helena. Wolves who came from the right families, who had the right bloodlines, who fit neatly into the hierarchy that governed their world. Not for forgotten Omegas living in cabins at the edge of nowhere. Alara rolled onto her side, pulling her knees to her chest. The humiliation was a physical ache in her chest. She kept seeing their faces, Helena's amused smirk, the crowd's casual cruelty, Garrick's cold dismissal, Caden's silence. That was the worst part, not that he'd chosen Helena. She'd always known that was coming. But that he'd stood there and let them laugh at her, let his father humiliate her, done nothing, said nothing, like she wasn't even worth defending. You shame yourself and your station. No, she didn't shame herself. The world had done that for her the moment she was born Omega. The tears came again, hot and bitter. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes burned. Cried until there was nothing left inside her but a hollow, aching emptiness. And then, in that emptiness, something shifted. A thought. Quiet at first. Then louder. What if you just didn't go back? She sat up slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. The thought should have terrified her. Lone wolves didn't survive. Everyone knew that. The wilderness was full of dangers. Rogues who'd been exiled from their packs, rival territories, predators both animal and wolf. Without pack protection, without their bonds and their territory, a wolf was vulnerable. Easy prey. But wasn't she already prey? Hadn't she always been? She'd spent 23 years trying to fit into a world that didn't want her. Trying to be small enough, quiet enough, useful enough that maybe they'd let her stay. And what had it gotten her? A cabin at the edge of territory, a handful of acquaintances who pitied her more than they liked her. And tonight, the final proof that she would never, ever be enough. What was the difference between dying alone in the forest and dying slowly in a pack that would never value her? At least in the forest, she'd die on her own terms. The decision settled over her like frost, cold, final, strangely peaceful. She stood and looked around the cabin, at the bed she'd built, the shelves lined with dried herbs and tinctures from her grandmother's teachings, the books she'd traded for and treasured, the simple life she'd carved out of nothing. She could take a pack. Not much, just the essentials. Food, water, a blanket, her grandmother's journal of herbal remedies. Travel light, move fast, put as much distance between herself and Shadow Ridge as possible before anyone noticed she was gone. They probably wouldn't even look for her. Why would they? She was nobody. Invisible. Expendable. Perfect. Alara moved quickly, gathering supplies by moonlight. She changed out of the gray dress, the one she'd mended so carefully, the one she'd thought might make her look pretty enough that Caden would notice, and put on her traveling clothes. Worn leather pants, a tunic, boots that had seen 100 forest walks. She strapped a knife to her belt, filled a canteen, wrapped dried meat and hard cheese in cloth. At the last moment, she grabbed her grandmother's journal. The leather cover was cracked with age, the pages yellowed and fragile. But the knowledge inside was priceless. Decades of accumulated wisdom about plants and healing and survival. If she was going to make it alone, she'd need every advantage. She took one last look at the cabin. Then she walked out the door and didn't look back. Besat. The forest at night was a different world. Without the pack bond, without the security of marked territory, every shadow felt dangerous. Every sound made her flinch. Her wolf instincts were screaming at her to turn back, to return to the safety of the pack. But she kept walking. The night stretched on. Hours passed. The moon tracked across the sky. Alara didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan beyond away from Shadow Ridge, away from Caden, away from the laughter and the shame and the crushing weight of a life that would never be hers. She followed game trails deeper into the wilderness, past familiar landmarks and into territory she'd only heard about in stories. The trees grew thicker here, older. The air smelled different, wilder, less touched by wolves. Her legs ached. Her feet blistered inside her boots. But she didn't stop. Dawn was maybe an hour away when the scent hit her. Blood. Fresh. Metallic. Strong. Alara froze, every instinct screaming danger. She should turn back, should run, should put as much distance as possible between herself and whatever violence had happened here. Instead, she followed the scent. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the reckless, self-destructive impulse of someone who'd already lost everything. Or maybe, probably, some part of her wanted to know if she was truly capable of walking away from someone in need, the way her pack had walked away from her. The scent led her off the trail, down into a rocky ravine thick with ferns and fallen logs. The smell grew stronger, overwhelming, and then she saw him. A man, naked, sprawled on his side in the dirt, half hidden by shadows. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and viscous in the pre-dawn light. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored gasps. Alara's breath caught. He was big. Even unconscious, even dying, he radiated power. Broad shoulders, lean, muscled frame covered in scars that told stories of violence survived. His face was turned toward her, sharp features, strong jaw, dark hair matted with blood and dirt, and his presence. Alpha. Not just any alpha. This was a wolf built for war, for dominance, for survival against impossible odds. Every survival instinct Alara possessed screamed at her to run. She crouched beside him instead. His skin was pale, cold to the touch. The wound in his side was deep, claw marks, probably from another wolf. The edges were ragged, still bleeding sluggishly. He'd lost too much blood, too much time. He was minutes from death. Leave him. This isn't your problem. You don't owe anyone anything. Not anymore. But her hands were already moving, tearing strips from her tunic, pressing them against the wound to slow the bleeding. He didn't react, didn't even flinch. Don't you dare die, she muttered, more to herself than to him. Not after I walked all this way. Why was she doing this? She didn't know him, didn't owe him. He was probably dangerous. Alphas like this always were. But maybe that was exactly the point. Maybe she was just so tired of being powerless, so desperate to make a choice that was entirely hers, that saving a dying stranger felt like the only act of defiance left. Or maybe she was just as stupid and self-destructive as everyone had always thought. The bleeding slowed. Not enough, but enough that he wouldn't die in the next 5 minutes. She rocked back on her heels, breathing hard, staring at the unconscious Alpha. Now what? She couldn't leave him here. He'd be dead by noon. And despite everything, despite the pack that had rejected her, despite the Alpha who'd betrayed her, despite every lesson she'd learned about survival, she couldn't just walk away. There was a cave system about a quarter-mile east. She'd passed it once before, years ago, exploring the far reaches of Shadow Ridge territory. It would provide shelter, keep them hidden, give her time to figure out what the hell she was doing, if she could just get him there. Alara looked at the man, at the 200 pounds of unconscious, dying wolf, and almost laughed. This was insane. She was barely 5'6" and lean from years of inadequate food. There was no way she could move him, but she had to try. She hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled. He was dead weight, pure, immovable mass. She pulled harder, digging her heels into the dirt, using every ounce of strength she possessed. He moved, maybe an inch. "Come on," she growled. Another pull, another few inches. Her shoulders screamed, her back spasmed, sweat soaked through her clothes despite the pre-dawn chill. But she kept going. Inch by agonizing inch, she dragged him through the ravine. Her hands blistered. Her muscles burned. Her lungs felt like they were on fire. She didn't stop. She couldn't. Because if she stopped, she'd have to acknowledge what she was doing, what she was risking, and that acknowledgement might break whatever desperate, defiant thing inside her that kept her moving. The cave entrance appeared through the trees like a miracle. Dark mouth in the rock face, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. Alara pulled the stranger inside and collapsed beside him, gasping for air. Her entire body trembled with exhaustion. Her vision swam. But he was here, sheltered, hidden, still dying, but slower now. She forced herself upright and looked around the cave. It was bigger than she remembered, maybe 20 feet deep, the ceiling high enough to stand. Dry. Protected from the elements. It would work. Alara gathered wood from just outside the cave entrance, using the last of her strength to build a small fire. The flames caught, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. In the firelight, she got her first good look at the stranger. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe early 30s. The scars that covered his torso and arms told a brutal story. This was a wolf who'd survived things that should have killed him. There was a particularly nasty one across his ribs, old and silvered, another along his collarbone. But it was his face that caught her attention. Even unconscious, even dying, he was striking, all hard angles and sharp edges. A face built for command, for intimidation, for power. Who was he? Why had someone tried to kill him? And why had she been stupid enough to save him? Questions for later. Right now, she needed to keep him alive. Alara opened her pack and pulled out her grandmother's journal. The leather was warm from being pressed against her back during the long walk. She flipped through pages by firelight, searching for the sections on trauma treatment. Her grandmother had been a healer, one of the best in Shadow Ridge, before the old Alpha had died and Garrick had taken over. She'd taught Alara everything she knew before passing, plants and their properties, how to set bones, how to stitch wounds, how to coax dying bodies back from the edge. Alara had never expected to use that knowledge on a stranger in a cave. But here she was. She worked by firelight, using supplies from her pack and materials gathered from the forest. Yarrow to stop the bleeding, crushed into a paste and packed into the wound. Comfrey for the broken ribs she could feel beneath his skin. Willow bark for the fever that she could already sense building. She cleaned the wounds with water from her canteen, picking out dirt and debris. The claw marks were deep. Whoever had attacked him had meant to kill. They'd almost succeeded. Elara stitched the worst of the wounds with thread she'd packed, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. She'd done this before, on herself, on small animals she'd found injured in the forest. Never on a dying alpha, but the principle was the same. Stop the bleeding, prevent infection, keep them warm. The rest was up to fate, or whatever force governed a world brutal enough to build hierarchies on birth and keep wolves like her invisible until they broke. By the time she finished, the sun was rising. Golden light filtered through the cave entrance, warm and gentle. The stranger's breathing was still shallow, but steadier. The bleeding had stopped. His color was marginally better. He might actually survive. Elara slumped against the cave wall, every muscle in her body screaming. She should sleep, should let herself rest, but she couldn't. If she closed her eyes, he might die. And for reasons she couldn't explain, couldn't examine, that felt unacceptable. So she sat there, feeding the fire, keeping watch, while an unnamed alpha fought for his life beside her. And outside the cave, the world moved on without them. 3 days passed before he opened his eyes. 3 days of Elara keeping vigil, changing bandages, forcing water down his throat whenever he'd swallow. 3 days of fever dreams where he thrashed and muttered in languages she didn't recognize. 3 days of wondering if she'd dragged a dying man into a cave just to watch him die slower. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, his breathing would change. Too shallow, too fast, too wrong. And she'd jolt awake in a panic. So she stayed up, feeding the fire, grinding herbs, telling herself that if he died, at least she'd tried. At least someone would know she'd been here, that she'd mattered, even if only to a stranger who'd never know her name. On the morning of the 4th day, she was changing the dressing on his ribs when his hand shot out and locked around her wrist. Elara gasped, jerking back, but his grip was iron. His eyes opened. Gray, storm gray, sharp as broken glass, focused with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment, he just stared at her, taking in the cave, the fire, the crude bandages wrapped around his torso. Then his gaze returned to her face, assessing, calculating. "Who are you?" His voice was a rasp, low and dangerous, even weakened by blood loss. "The person who saved your life." "Why?" That was the question, wasn't it? She still didn't have a good answer. "I don't know," she admitted. Seemed like the right thing to do. His eyes narrowed. "Where am I?" "About 10 miles south of Shadow Ridge territory, in a cave. You were dying when I found you." "Who sent you?" "No one sent me. I found you by accident." She tried to pull her wrist free, but he didn't release her. "Can you let go? I need to check your wounds." He studied her face for another long moment, looking for lies. She met his gaze, unflinching. She'd spent her whole life being invisible. She knew how to hold still under scrutiny. Finally, he released her. She rubbed her wrist where his fingers had pressed, not painful, but firm enough to bruise, and reached for the water canteen. "You need to drink." He took it and drank deeply, his throat working. When he lowered the canteen, some of the sharpness had left his eyes, replaced by exhaustion. He slumped back against the cave wall, breathing hard. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "Ambush." The word came out flat. "Rival pack. They cornered me at the northern border, 5 against 1. Thought they could take me." His mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "They were wrong. Looks like they came pretty close. Close only counts in horseshoes." He touched the bandages on his ribs, wincing. "How long have I been out?" 3 days. You had a fever. Lost a lot of blood." 3 days. He cursed under his breath. Then his gaze sharpened again, fixing on her with uncomfortable intensity. "You've been here the whole time, alone." "Yes." "Why? You already asked that, and you didn't answer." Elara looked away, busying herself with checking the other bandages. "I couldn't just leave you there to die." "Why not? You don't know me. For all you know, I deserved it."
Did you? He was quiet for a moment. No. Then there's your answer.
Silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Alara could feel him watching her, that predator's gaze tracking her every movement. It should have frightened her, would have frightened most wolves. But she'd already run from one pack, already chosen exile over safety. What was one more dangerous alpha compared to a lifetime of invisible suffering? "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Alara." "Alara." He said it slowly, like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Kyle."
Nice to meet you, Kyle.
His mouth twitched. "Is it?" Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Jury's still out." Another silence. Then, "Your pack broken." It wasn't a question. Her spine stiffened. "How did you—" "Your scent, your posture, the way you flinch when I move too fast." His gray eyes pinned her. "You're alone out here. No bond, no protection. And you're calm about it, which means it's recent. What happened?" "That's none of your business. You saved my life. That makes everything about you my business. Then consider the debt paid and leave me alone." "Can't do that." "Why not?" "Because I don't leave debts unpaid." He shifted, trying to sit up straighter, and immediately went pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "And because a lone Omega won't last a week out here. You need protection. I don't need anything from you." "Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet." The arrogance in his voice sparked something hot in her chest. "I've survived just fine without an alpha's protection, thanks. For 3 days, in a cave, nursing a stranger." His gaze was relentless. "What happens when I'm healed? When you have to hunt? When rogues catch your scent? When winter comes and you're alone with no pack, no territory, no—" "I said I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running." He leaned forward slightly, ignoring the obvious pain it caused. "Who hurt you? What makes you think—" "I've seen that look before. On wolves who've been broken by their own kind." His voice gentled slightly. "What happened?" And maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that he was a stranger who'd be gone as soon as he healed. Maybe it was just that she was so tired of carrying it alone. But Alara talked. She told him about the harvest gathering, about Caden and Helena and the sapphire cuff, about standing in front of 300 wolves while they laughed at her humiliation, about Garrick's dismissal and Caden's silence and the moment she'd realized she would never, ever be enough. Kyle listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You were right to leave," he said finally. "Was I?" "Yes. A pack that doesn't see your worth doesn't deserve your loyalty." Easy for an alpha to say. "You think being alpha makes life easy?" He laughed, bitter, humorless. "I've got a target on my back the size of a kingdom. Every rival wants me dead. Every ally wants to use me. I trust no one, and no one trusts me." He met her gaze. "But at least I'm free to choose my enemies." "You call that freedom?" "I call it survival." She didn't have an answer for that. Kael's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion pulling at him. "Stay," he said quietly. "Just until I'm healed. Then we'll figure out what comes next." "There's no we. You'll leave, and I'll die alone in the wilderness?" His eyes opened again, sharp despite the fatigue. "You saved my life, Alara. Whether you want it or not, that binds us. I don't abandon debts, and I sure as hell don't abandon wolves who showed me mercy when they had every reason not to." Before she could respond, he'd slipped back into sleep. Alara sat there, staring at the dying stranger who was somehow becoming less of a stranger, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Kyle healed fast, impossibly fast, even with her grandmother's remedies. Within a week, the fever had broken completely. The wounds were closing, pink and angry, but no longer bleeding. He could sit up without going pale, could stand, albeit with difficulty, and walk a few steps before exhaustion forced him back down. Alpha healing. She'd heard about it, but never seen it up close. Their bodies recovered from injuries that would cripple ordinary wolves. It was part of what made them so dangerous, part of what made them so feared. As his strength returned, so did his questions. He wanted to know everything, where she'd learned healing, why she'd been alone in the forest that night, what her plans were now that she'd left her pack. He asked with the persistence of someone used to getting answers, and despite herself, Alara found herself responding. She told him about her grandmother, about learning herbs and remedies because it was the only way an Omega could be useful, about reading every book she could trade for, memorizing every scrap of knowledge, because information was the one form of power they couldn't take from her. In return, he told her fragments of his own story. Never the full picture, she got the sense he was holding back, being careful, but enough to sketch the outline. He'd been born to power, but had fought for every scrap of it, had enemies who wanted him dead and allies who'd turn on him the moment it benefited them, had built something from nothing and would burn the world before letting anyone take it. "You're not just any alpha, are you?" she asked one morning while changing his bandages. He went very still. "What makes you say that?" "The scars, the way you talk, the fact that 5 wolves ambushed you instead of challenging you to single combat." She tied off the bandage. "You're someone important, someone dangerous. Would it change anything if I was?" "I don't know. Would it?" Kale studied her face. Then, slowly, he said, "I'm the Alpha King of the Eastern Territories." The words hung in the air between them. Alara's hands stilled. "You're lying." "I'm not. The Alpha King wouldn't be alone in the wilderness. He would if he was hunting the wolves who'd betrayed him." Kale's voice was flat. "I had intelligence that some of my own guard were conspiring with the rival Blackwater pack. I went to confirm it personally. Turns out I was right. Also turns out there were more traitors than I'd thought." "So you're telling me I saved a king?" "Yes." "And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Would you have believed me?" Fair point. She barely believed it now, and she'd been nursing him for over a week. Alara rocked back on her heels, processing. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the Eastern Territories, ruler of a dozen packs, commander of hundreds of wolves, currently sitting in a cave, half-healed because she'd been stupid enough to drag him here. "Why are you telling me now?" she asked. "Because my guard will come looking for me. They should have found me days ago, which means either the traitors killed them or they're searching the wrong area." He met her gaze. "Either way, they'll find us eventually. And when they do, I need you to trust me." "Trust you? I don't even know you." "You know I don't leave debts unpaid. You know I value loyalty. And you know—" He paused. "You know what it's like to be cast aside by wolves who should have protected you." That hit closer than she wanted to admit. "What happens when they find us?" she asked quietly. "You come with me." "To where?" "The capital, my court." Alara laughed. She couldn't help it. "I can't go to court. I'm nobody. I don't belong. Neither did I once." His voice was firm. "I was the bastard son of an alpha who barely acknowledged me. Fought my way up from nothing. Built my power one bloody battle at a time." He leaned forward slightly. "You saved my life when you had every reason not to. That makes you someone. And I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours." "Not yet. But you will be." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Not fear. Something else. Something dangerous. "What if I refuse?" she asked. "Then you stay here and take your chances alone." He held her gaze. "But we both know how that ends." He was right. She hated that he was right, but she was. Lone Omegas didn't survive. She'd lasted this long only because she'd found him, because nursing him had given her purpose and kept her in one place. But once he left, she'd be alone again. Vulnerable. Hunted. "Why do you care?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "You don't owe me anything beyond healing. Once you're better, you could just leave. Forget I exist." Kale's expression shifted. For just a moment, the hard mask cracked, and she saw something raw underneath. "Because I know what it's like to be thrown away," he said quietly. "And I swore a long time ago that if I ever had power, I'd use it to protect wolves like us, the ones the world tried to break." Us. The word settled in her chest like an ember. Before she could respond, Kyle stiffened. His head turned toward the cave entrance, nostrils flaring. "What?" "Horses," he said. "Multiple riders, coming fast." Alara's heart jumped into her throat. "Your guard?" "Probably." He was already standing, ignoring the obvious pain it caused. "Stay behind me." "You can barely walk." "I said stay behind me." The command in his voice, was absolute. Alpha authority, the kind that made wolves obey on instinct. Alara found herself stepping back before she'd consciously decided to move. Kyle positioned himself between her and the cave entrance, his stance protective despite his injuries. Even wounded, even barely healed, he radiated danger. The sound of hooves grew louder, then voices, then the jingle of armor and weapons. 6 riders appeared at the cave entrance, silhouettes backlit by midday sun. They wore black and silver armor, swords at their hips. The lead rider dismounted smoothly and stepped into the cave. When he saw Kyle, he dropped to one knee so fast it must have hurt. "Your Majesty." The other riders followed suit, a wave of black and silver kneeling in the dirt. Alara's breath caught. It was real. All of it. Kyle wasn't lying. He really was a king. "Report," Kyle said, his voice cold and absolute. "The ambush has been dealt with, sire. The traitors are dead. Their bodies burned." The lead guard's voice was steady, professional. "But the court is in chaos. Your absence has caused complications. There are rumors you were killed. Some of the outer packs are already positioning themselves for a succession challenge. Let them try." Kale's voice was ice. "How long have you been searching?" "5 days, Your Majesty. We tracked you to the border, but the trail went cold. The traitors covered their tracks well." "Not well enough. They're dead, you said?" "Yes, sire, all 5. We took our time with them." The guard's tone suggested the deaths hadn't been quick. Kale nodded once. "Good. Prepare the horses. We leave within the hour." "At once, Your Majesty." The guard started to rise, then his gaze landed on Alara. His eyes widened slightly. "My lord, the Omega is under my protection," Kyle said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "She saved my life. She comes with us." The guard's expression flickered. Surprise, confusion, and something else. Doubt, maybe. Or disapproval. "Your Majesty, with respect, bringing an unbonded Omega to court was not a request, Commander." Kale's eyes were hard. "She comes with us. Anyone who questions that answers to me personally. Is that clear?" The guard swallowed. "Crystal, sire." "Good. Now move." The guards filed out quickly, leaving Alara and Kyle alone in the cave. She stared at him. At this stranger who'd been dying in the dirt a week ago and was now giving orders like the world itself would bend to his will. Maybe it would. "I can't do this," she said quietly. "Yes, you can." "You don't understand. I don't know how to—" She gestured helplessly. "I'm nobody. I don't belong in a court. I don't know politics or proper behavior or—" "You know how to survive. You know how to make hard choices. You know how to show mercy when it would have been easier to walk away." Kyle crossed to her, moving carefully, and stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "That's more than most of the nobles at my court can claim. They'll eat me alive. Not while I'm breathing." The promise in those words made something in her chest tighten. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because I don't leave debts unpaid." He held her gaze. "And because you deserve better than dying alone in a forest, because some privileged alpha was too much of a coward to defend you." Her throat tightened. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of him. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He stepped back, giving her space. "But fear doesn't have to control you. You already proved that when you saved me." The guards called from outside. The horses were ready. Kael extended his hand. Alara stared at it, at the choice he was offering. Go with him and face a world that would judge her, doubt her, possibly destroy her. Or stay here and face the wilderness alone. Both options terrified her, but only one offered the chance at something more than just survival. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, steady. "Let's go," he said. They walked out of the cave together. The journey to the capital took 2 days. 2 days of riding through territory that made Shadow Ridge look like a backwater outpost. The forests here were managed, the roads maintained. They passed villages and farms, saw wolves working in organized groups, children playing safely in marked territories. This was civilization, order, power made visible. And Alara had never felt more out of place. She rode behind one of the guards, clinging to his armor, hyper-aware of every stare from wolves they passed. They looked at her with curiosity, confusion, some with barely concealed contempt. An Omega riding with the king's guard. It wasn't done. Kyle rode at the front, straight-backed despite his injuries, radiating authority. No one questioned him. No one dared. Even wounded, even freshly recovered, he commanded respect through sheer presence. The capital appeared on the afternoon of the second day. Alara's breath caught. It was massive, stone walls 30 feet high, guard towers at every corner. Inside she could see buildings 3 and 4 stories tall, roads paved with cobblestones, wolves moving in organized chaos. The scent of hundreds, no, thousands of wolves hit her like a wall. "Welcome to Ravencrest," Kyle said, pulling his horse alongside hers. "My home. It's big. Wait till you see the palace." The palace was worse. It sprawled across the city's highest point, a fortress of dark stone and silver accents. Towers stretched toward the sky. Windows gleamed like watching eyes. Guards stood at every entrance, armed and alert. This was power, real, undeniable, terrifying power. And she was riding straight into its heart. The gates opened as they approached. Guards saluted. Servants rushed forward to take the horses. And everywhere, wolves stared at her. Whispers followed them through the courtyard. Omega, where did she come from? Surely he didn't. Kyle ignored it all. He dismounted smoothly, then turned to help her down. His hand at her waist was steady, possessive. A statement. A tall woman emerged from the palace entrance, her posture rigid with disapproval. She wore formal robes in deep red, her gray hair pulled back severely. When she saw Kyle, relief flashed across her face before being replaced by cold composure. "Your Majesty, thank the—" She stopped, her gaze landing on Alara. "Who is this?" "The woman who saved my life," Kyle said flatly. "Lady Alara. She's under my protection." The woman's nostrils flared. "Your Majesty, surely you have rooms prepared for her. Guest quarters, the East Wing." His tone left no room for argument. The woman's jaw tightened. "As you wish, Your Majesty, but the council will have questions." "Let them ask." He guided Alara forward with a hand on her lower back, and she had no choice but to follow. Through doors that were twice her height, down hallways lined with portraits of stern-faced alphas, past servants who bowed and stared and whispered. The guest quarters were more opulent than anything she'd ever seen. The bed alone was bigger than her entire cabin had been. Windows overlooked manicured gardens, tapestries covered the walls. "This is too much," she said quietly. "It's barely adequate." Kale moved to the windows, checking them with the practiced eye of someone always calculating security. "You'll have guards outside your door. Don't leave these rooms without an escort. Not yet." "I'm a prisoner?" "You're protected. There's a difference." He turned to face her. "The court will want to know about you. Who you are. Where you came from. Why I brought you here. Some will be curious, some will be hostile. All of them will test you." "I can't do this." The walls felt like they were closing in. "I don't belong here." "You belong wherever I say you belong." He crossed to her, his gray eyes intense. "Listen to me. You survived a pack that tried to break you. You saved a dying king with nothing but herbs and stubbornness. You made a choice that terrified you because it was the right thing to do." His hand came up to cup her jaw, gentle despite the calluses. "You're stronger than you think. And you're under my protection now. No one touches you. No one hurts you. Not while I'm breathing." The touch sent electricity down her spine. She should pull away, should put distance between them. She didn't move. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and honest and almost painful. "Because when I was dying in that ravine, I didn't expect to survive. Didn't particularly want to." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "And then you appeared. This Omega who had every reason to leave me there, who'd been destroyed by her own pack, who was running from everything she'd known. And you saved me anyway. You chose mercy over survival, compassion over safety." He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "That's rare, Alara. Rare enough that I'll burn this entire court to the ground before I let them destroy it." Her breath caught. "Kyle..." A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Kyle stepped back smoothly, the moment breaking. Enter. The commander from earlier stepped inside, his expression grim. Your Majesty, the council demands an audience. They've heard about the situation. They're convening in the throne room within the hour. Let them convene. My lord, they're calling for... He glanced at Alara. They're questioning your judgment, bringing an unbonded Omega to court. Some are suggesting she's a security risk. Others are simply offended. Kale's expression went cold. And what do you think, Commander? The guard straightened. I think you're alive because of her, sire. That's all that matters. Good answer. Kale turned back to Alara. Stay here. Rest. Eat. I'll handle the council. What are you going to tell them? A dangerous smile curved his mouth. The truth. That you're under my protection. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. He strode toward the door, then paused. Alara. Yes? Thank you for saving my life, for trusting me, for being here. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Alara stood alone in the massive room, surrounded by luxury she'd never dreamed of, protected by a king she barely knew. And through the windows she could hear the distant murmur of the court, waiting, judging, ready to tear her apart. The throne room was built to intimidate. Alara had been summoned 3 hours after Kael left, 3 hours of pacing her gilded cage, of servants bringing food she couldn't eat, of watching the sun set over a city that wanted nothing to do with her. When the knock came, she'd almost been grateful. Waiting was worse than facing whatever came next. Almost. Now standing at the massive double doors with a stone-faced guard on either side, she understood why they'd made her wait. Fear was a weapon here. Let it build. Let it fester. Let it remind her exactly how small she was in this world of kings and power. The doors opened. The throne room stretched before her like a cathedral of judgment. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Columns thick as ancient trees lined both sides. And at the far end, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat Kael's throne, carved from a single piece of obsidian, angular and sharp as a blade. Kael sat there now, no longer the wounded stranger from the cave. He wore formal robes of black and silver, a crown of twisted metal resting on his dark hair. His posture was relaxed, almost lazy, but his eyes tracked her with predatory focus. Between her and the throne stood at least 50 wolves, nobles by the look of them, elaborate clothing, haughty expressions, the kind of casual arrogance that came from generations of unchallenged power. They turned as one when she entered, their gazes raking over her with undisguised contempt. She wore a simple dress the servants had provided. Gray, like everything else in her life. It fit poorly, hung wrong, made her look exactly like what she was, an Omega out of her depth. Walk forward, the guard behind her murmured. Don't stop until you reach the throne. Her legs felt like water, but she walked. Every step echoed in the cavernous space. Every eye followed her progress. The whispers started immediately. Can't believe he actually brought her. Absolutely no breeding. Insulting to even... Alara kept her chin up and her gaze forward. She'd survived Shadow Ridge's cruelty. She'd survived exile. She could survive this. She hoped. She stopped at the base of the dais, maybe 20 feet from the throne. Close enough to see Kael's expression, carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Close enough to feel the weight of his authority pressing down on her like a physical thing. An older man stepped forward from the crowd. He wore robes even more elaborate than Kael's, deep crimson with gold threading. His hair was silver, his face lined with age and cunning. Your Majesty, he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. We are, of course, overjoyed at your safe return. The entire court has been in turmoil over your absence. I'm sure you were devastated, Lord Brennan. Kael's voice was dry as bone. Indeed. Brennan's gaze slid to Alara, sharp and assessing. However, your return has raised questions, specifically regarding your companion. Lady Alara saved my life. I've made that clear. So you have, and we are grateful for her service. The words dripped with false courtesy. However, bringing an unbonded Omega into the royal court creates complications. Complications we feel must be addressed. What complications? Security, for one. We know nothing about her. Her background, her loyalties, her intentions. Brennan circled slowly, and Alara had the distinct impression of a wolf circling prey. For all we know, she could be a spy for the very packs that ambushed you. Her presence at that ravine could have been orchestrated. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kael's expression didn't change. You think she orchestrated her own pack exile? Impressive planning for an Omega. We only have her word that she was exiled. For all we know, enough. Kael's voice cracked like a whip. The room went silent. Alara saved my life when she could have walked away, when she had every reason to leave me to die. She tended my wounds, kept me alive through fever, and asked for nothing in return. Those are facts. Everything else is speculation based on prejudice. Brennan's smile didn't waver. Your Majesty, no one questions your gratitude, but gratitude and sound judgment are not the same thing. Bringing an unbonded Omega to court, particularly one with no family, no connections, no status, sets a dangerous precedent. What precedent is that? That station doesn't matter, that an Omega can rise above her place simply by being in the right location at the right time. Brennan's voice hardened. The hierarchy exists for a reason, Your Majesty. It maintains order, stability. When we blur those lines, we risk chaos. More murmurs, more agreement. Alara's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice wouldn't come. This wasn't a trial. It was a performance. They'd already decided what she was. Kael leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes cold. Are you questioning my judgment, Lord Brennan? I'm questioning the wisdom of allowing emotion to override protocol. Interesting, because I seem to recall you advocating for me to spare Lord Vance after he was caught embezzling from the treasury. Your nephew, wasn't he? Brennan's smile tightened. That was different. How? He's alpha-born, educated, of good family, osquillo, and a thief. But you wanted mercy for him because he had the right bloodline. Kael stood, descending the steps of the dais with lethal grace. Even recovered, even regal, he moved like violence contained. Tell me, Brennan, which is worse, an Omega who saves lives or an Alpha who steals from his own people? The silence was absolute. Brennan's composure cracked slightly. Your Majesty, this is hardly... Answer the question. It's not comparable. It's exactly comparable. Kael stopped in front of Alara, positioning himself between her and the court. A shield. A wall. You want to judge her for her birth. Fine. But if we're judging wolves by their actions instead of their blood, she's shown more honor than half the nobles in this room. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Elegant, blonde, her gown so elaborate it probably cost more than a commoner earned in a year. Your Majesty, Lord Brennan raises valid concerns, but perhaps there's a simpler solution. Kael's eyes narrowed. Lady Morgana, how thoughtful of you to contribute. I only wish to help. Her smile was poison sweet. The Omega, Alara was it, claims to have saved your life. A noble act, certainly. Perhaps the appropriate reward would be a generous purse and safe escort back to wherever she came from. That way she's compensated for her service and the court avoids any awkwardness. You want me to pay her off and send her away? I want to preserve the integrity of this court. Morgana's gaze flicked to Alara with barely concealed disdain. No offense intended, of course. I'm sure she's a perfectly adequate Omega, but she doesn't belong here. Surely even she can see that. Every word was a knife. Alara felt them sink in, one by one, finding all the places she was already bleeding. What do you think? Kael asked quietly. It took Alara a moment to realize he was talking to her. What? They're discussing your future like you're not standing right here. Seems rude. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. So I'm asking, what do you think? Every eye in the room locked on her, her throat closed up. She'd spent her entire life being invisible, staying quiet, making herself small. Speaking up at the harvest gathering had gotten her exiled. What would speaking up here cost? But Kael was watching her, waiting, not with judgment, but with expectation, like he actually wanted to hear what she had to say. I think... Her voice came out rough. She cleared her throat and tried again. I think you're all terrified. Shocked silence. Morgana's eyes widened. Excuse me? You heard me. Something hot and reckless was building in Alara's chest.
The same thing that had made her save Kael, that had made her leave Shadow Ridge. You're terrified, because if an Omega can save a king, if someone from the bottom can do something none of you could, it means your power isn't as secure as you thought. It means birth doesn't guarantee worth. How dare you? Brennan sputtered. I'm not finished. The words were pouring out now, unstoppable. You talk about hierarchy like it's sacred, like it's natural. But all I see is wolves clinging to power they didn't earn, terrified that someone might take it away. You don't want me here because I'm a threat to your comfortable little world where everyone knows their place and nobody questions it. This is outrageous. Is it? She turned to face Brennan directly. Your nephew stole from his own people, and you wanted mercy because he had the right bloodline. I saved a king's life, and you want me punished because I don't. Tell me how that's not about protecting your privilege. Brennan's face flushed red. You insolent— Enough! Kael's voice cut through the rising chaos. He looked at Alara, and something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. She stays. Your Majesty, this is madness. She stays, Kael repeated, his voice brooking no argument. Under my protection. In my court. And anyone who has a problem with that can— The doors at the far end of the throne room burst open. A guard stumbled through, his armor dented, his face pale with panic. Your Majesty, the Eastern Gate, we're under attack. The room erupted in chaos. Kael was moving before the echoes faded, shouting orders. Commander, secure the palace. Brennan, evacuate the nobles to the lower chambers. Morgana. I know the protocols, she said coldly. Then move. Wolves scattered in every direction. Brennan shot Alara one last venomous look before disappearing into the crowd. Within seconds, the throne room had emptied, leaving only Kael, Alara, and a handful of guards. What's happening? Alara asked. Blackwater Pack. Kael's expression was grim. They must have heard I survived. This is their play for the throne. He turned to the nearest guard. Take her to the secure chambers. Now. I'm not hiding. You're not trained for combat. You stay here. You die. Is that clear? Before she could argue, the guard grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a side door. She looked back at Kael, at the king who'd defended her, who'd given her a chance when no one else would. He was already running toward the eastern gate, toward the sound of breaking glass and screaming wolves, toward war. Tuo! The secure chambers were deep underground, carved from the bedrock beneath the palace. Alara sat on a stone bench with a dozen other wolves, servants mostly, and a few minor nobles who'd been too slow to evacuate with the others. The air was cold and stale. The only light came from torches bracketed to the walls. Above them, muffled by stone and distance, the sounds of battle raged. Alara couldn't sit still. She paced the small space, her mind racing. Kael was up there, fighting, possibly dying. And she was down here, useless, while the court that had just tried to throw her out burned. You should rest, said a servant girl, maybe 17, her eyes wide with fear. Could be hours before it's safe. I can't just sit here. What else can you do? You're not a fighter. No, she wasn't, but she wasn't useless either. Alara turned to the guard stationed at the door. How bad is it? Bad enough that we're down here. His jaw was tight. Blackwater came in force, at least 50 fighters, maybe more. They breached the eastern wall, and now they're pushing toward the palace. Do we have healers? Medical supplies? The royal physician is with the wounded in the great hall. But, he paused. We're overwhelmed. Too many injured, not enough hands. Alara's grandmother's voice echoed in her head. Knowledge is the one form of power they can't take from you. Take me to them. The guard blinked. What? The wounded. I'm a healer. I can help. My orders are to keep you here. Your orders are to protect me. I'm choosing to go help the wounded. You can either escort me or explain to the king why you let his healer sit in a hole while his wolves bled out. The guard's jaw worked. Then, follow me, and stay close. They moved through the underground passages quickly, the sounds of battle growing louder. When they emerged into the great hall, Alara's breath caught. It was carnage. Wounded wolves covered every available surface, tables, benches, even the floor. Blood pooled in the spaces between them.
The air reeked of sweat and fear and death. A handful of healers moved among the injured, their faces drawn with exhaustion. An older man in blood-stained robes looked up as she entered. "Who are you?" "A healer. Put me to work." He didn't argue, just pointed to a section of wounded near the far wall. "Start there. We're triaging. Save who you can." Alara dove in. Her grandmother's training took over, instinct overriding fear. She moved from wolf to wolf, assessing injuries, prioritizing. This one had a severed artery, pressure, tourniquet, immediate attention. This one had a collapsed lung. Prop them up, keep the airway clear. This one was already too far gone. Comfort them, move on. It was brutal, mechanical. The only way to survive it was to not think, to not feel, to just act. Hours blurred together. At some point, the sounds of battle faded. At another point, someone pressed a water canteen into her hands and she drank without tasting. Her dress was soaked with blood. Her hands cramped, but she didn't stop. A young guard grabbed her arm. "The Omega from before, the one the king brought. Is that you?" "Yes." "What?" "He's asking for you. The king. He's in the courtyard." Her heart stopped. "Is he hurt?" "Not badly, but he wants you. Now." She followed the guard through passages choked with smoke and debris. The palace had taken damage, walls cracked, windows shattered, bodies of Blackwater wolves being dragged away by grim-faced guards. But they'd held. The courtyard was chaos, wounded being tended, prisoners being restrained, fires being put out. And in the center of it all, standing beside what looked like a hastily constructed command post, was Kael. He was alive, bloodied, his robes torn, his crown gone, but alive. Relief hit her so hard she nearly stumbled. His eyes found hers across the courtyard. For a moment, everything else faded, the chaos, the wounded, the watching wolves. Just him, alive, looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. Then his expression shifted, hardened. "Bring them forward," he said to the guards. 2 prisoners were dragged into view, Blackwater wolves, their hands bound, their faces defiant. "These 2 were captured trying to reach the royal chambers," Kael said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "They've admitted they were sent to assassinate specific targets." One of the prisoners spat blood. "We'll tell you nothing, you bastard." "You already told me everything." Kael's smile was cold. "You were sent to kill Lord Brennan and Lady Morgana, the nobles who've been most vocal about destabilizing my rule, which means someone in my court is working with Blackwater." The words dropped like stones in still water. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Accusations, denials, fear. "But that's not the interesting part," Kael continued. He looked at Alara. "The interesting part is that they were also sent to kill you." Everything stopped. "What?" Alara breathed. "Tell her," Kael ordered the prisoner. "Tell her why Blackwater wants her dead." The prisoner laughed, bitter, harsh. "Because she's a threat. Because of what she is." "And what is she?" "Silvermane, last of the bloodline, the ones who were supposed to rule the Eastern Territories before your grandfather slaughtered them all." The courtyard went silent. Alara's vision swam. That's not your grandmother," the prisoner said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Arya Silvermane, the great healer who disappeared 30 years ago, who hid in a backwater pack, married an Omega, raised a daughter who married another Omega, all to keep the bloodline secret, to keep you safe." "No." The word came out weak. "My grandmother was just a healer. She was Silvermane Alpha-born, which makes your mother half-blood, which makes you a—" The prisoner grinned. "Pure enough to transform, strong enough to challenge, dangerous enough to kill before you figure it out." Kael's voice was quiet. "Dangerous. How long have you known?" "Since the moment we saw her. Scent markers don't lie. Silvermane blood burns different than common Omega. We reported it immediately. Our Alpha sent us to eliminate the threat." Alara's legs gave out. She caught herself on a broken pillar, her mind reeling. Silvermane, the pack that had once ruled the Eastern Territories. The bloodline Kael's grandfather had wiped out in a brutal coup 3 decades ago. Everyone thought they were extinct, but her grandmother— "It's not true," she whispered. "It can't be true." Kael crossed to her, his expression unreadable. "When did you first shift?" I, I've never shifted. I'm Omega. Omegas can't. Omegas with dormant alpha blood can. If the bloodline is strong enough, if the trigger is right. His gray eyes bored into hers. When did your grandmother die? When I was 60. And after that, any strange symptoms? Unexplained strength? Healing faster than you should? She thought about the years since her grandmother's death, the way she'd always been stronger than other Omegas, the way injuries healed quicker than they should, the way she'd always felt like something was coiled tight inside her chest, waiting. Waiting for what? This is impossible, she said. If I was Alpha-born, someone would have known. The pack would have... Your grandmother suppressed it. Kael's voice was gentle now. Silvermanes were famous for their herbal knowledge, for their ability to manipulate wolf biology. She probably dosed you with something from birth, kept your wolf dormant, kept you safe. Safe from what? From being alpha? Alara laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. I spent my whole life invisible, powerless, and you're telling me it was all a lie? Not a lie. Protection. He gripped her shoulders. If anyone had known what you were, you'd have been killed. My grandfather made sure of that. He didn't just defeat the Silvermanes, he exterminated them. Men, women, children. Anyone with even a drop of that bloodline. Why? Because they were stronger. Their alpha blood ran deeper. They produced alphas at 3 times the rate of normal packs. His expression was grim. My grandfather feared them, so he destroyed them, and he spent the rest of his life hunting rumors of survivors. Alara's hands shook. So what does that make me? Dangerous, said a cold voice. They turned. Lord Brennan stood at the edge of the courtyard, flanked by a dozen guards. His face was pale, but his eyes were hard as stone. Dangerous to Blackwater, certainly, he continued, but also dangerous to us, to the current power structure, to the king himself. He looked at Kael. Your Majesty, you must see reason. Silvermane blood cannot be allowed to survive. Your grandfather's laws were clear. Any survivor must be executed. That law is 3 decades old, and still valid, written in blood, sealed by the council. Brennan's voice hardened. If you spare her, you violate your grandfather's will, you open the door for challenges, you destabilize everything we've built. I don't care. You should, because half this court agrees with me. Brennan gestured, and more nobles emerged from the shadows. Too many, all watching Alara with fear and calculation. The Silvermane bloodline is poison. It must be purged. Kael's hand dropped to his sword. Touch her, and you die. You'd kill your own nobles to protect an Omega? In a heartbeat. The tension was a living thing, sharp enough to cut. Then Alara felt it. Something inside her chest, coiled and waiting, suddenly moved. Heat flooded her veins, her vision sharpened. The sounds of the courtyard grew louder, clearer, every heartbeat distinct. And the power, the raw, undeniable power that had been suppressed her entire life, erupted. She screamed. Her body convulsed, bones cracked and reformed, muscle tore and rebuilt. Her skin burned like it was being flayed away. And then she was changing, shifting, becoming something she'd been denied her entire life. The transformation was agony and ecstasy wrapped together. When it finally stopped, Alara stood on 4 legs, her body covered in silver-white fur that seemed to glow in the firelight. She was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf. Her claws were black as obsidian. Her eyes blazed gold. Alpha, pure, undeniable, terrifying. The courtyard was silent. Then slowly, one by one, the wolves began to bow. Not to Kael, to her. The first wolf to bow was a young guard she didn't recognize. He dropped to one knee, head lowered, exposing his throat in the ultimate sign of submission. Then another, and another. Like dominoes falling, the wolves in the courtyard bent beneath the weight of her presence. Alara stood frozen in her wolf form, her massive silver body trembling. Her mind was chaos. Too many sensations, too much power, everything too sharp and too loud and too much. She could smell fear rolling off the nobles in waves, could hear their heartbeats, rapid and panicked, could feel the ancient bloodline singing in her veins like it had been waiting 23 years to wake up. She tried to shift back, to return to human form, but her body wouldn't obey. The wolf was in control now, primal and furious and done with hiding. Everyone back away from her. Kael's voice cut through the chaos. He hadn't bowed, hadn't moved, just stood there, sword still drawn, positioned between her and the nobles. Slowly, no sudden movements. Your Majesty, Brennan's voice shook. This is exactly what we feared. Silvermane blood cannot be controlled. She's dangerous. She just saved half your lives in the medical hall. I'd say that makes her less dangerous than the nobles who conspired with Blackwater. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Brennan's face went white. How dare you suggest— I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Kael's gray eyes were cold as winter. The prisoners confessed. Blackwater knew exactly where to strike, which gates to breach, which nobles to target. Someone gave them intelligence. Someone in this court. That's preposterous. Is it? Because they also knew about Alar's bloodline. Information that wasn't even in our archives. Information that someone had to dig deep to find. Kael took a step forward. You've been working against me since I took the throne, Brennan. I've tolerated it because you're old and connected, and removing you would cost more than it's worth. But conspiracy with an enemy pack? Attempting to have your king assassinated? He smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing Alar had ever seen. That's treason. Guards moved before Brennan could react. They seized him, dragged him forward, forced him to his knees. Other nobles tried to slip away into the shadows, but more guards appeared, blocking the exits. Anyone else want to confess? Kael asked mildly. Now's the time. I'm feeling merciful. Silence. Absolute terrified silence. Alara's wolf growled low in her chest. The sound reverberated through the courtyard, primal and commanding. Wolves flinched. Some whimpered. Even the guards looked nervous. Kael turned to her and his expression softened. Alara, I know you're scared. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to shift back. Can you do that? She didn't know how. Her grandmother had never taught her this part because she'd never been supposed to have this part. Breathe, she thought desperately. Breathe and focus, and the shift happened in reverse. Painful, wrenching, like being turned inside out. When it finished, she was human again, naked and shaking on the blood-stained stones of the courtyard. Someone threw a cloak over her shoulders. She clutched it around herself, trying to stop the trembling that had nothing to do with cold. That's— Her voice came out hoarse. That's not possible. I'm Omega. I can't be Alpha. The pack tested me when I was born. Your grandmother sabotaged the test, Kael said quietly. He knelt beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Silvermane healers were famous for it. They could suppress bloodline markers, make Alpha blood read as Omega. She protected you the only way she knew how. By lying to me my entire life? By keeping you alive. The words hit like a physical blow. Alara pressed her hands to her face, trying to process. Everything she'd believed about herself, every moment of invisibility, every instance of being overlooked, every second of being treated as lesser, had been based on a lie. A necessary lie, maybe. A protective lie. But a lie nonetheless. What happens now? She whispered. Kael stood, addressing the courtyard. What happens now is that we acknowledge reality. Alara Silvermane is Alpha-born, pure bloodline, which makes her one of the most powerful wolves in the Eastern Territories. She's also a threat to your rule, someone called from the crowd. Lady Morgana, her elegant face twisted with calculation. Silvermane blood has claim to the throne. Older claim than yours. I'm aware. Then you understand the danger. If she chooses to challenge you, then I'll deal with it. Kael's voice was hard. But until she does, she's under my protection. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. You'd risk civil war for an Omega? She's not an Omega. The correction was sharp. And yes, I would. Morgana's eyes narrowed. Why? What is she to you? Good question. Alara wanted to hear the answer almost as much as the nobles did. Kael looked at her, and something passed between them. Something that had started in a cave when she'd chosen to save a dying stranger. Something that had grown with every conversation, every moment of trust, every choice to believe in each other when the world told them not to. She's mine, he said simply. That's all you need to know. The possessiveness in those words should have angered her. should have made her bristle at being claimed like property. Instead, it made her feel safe for the first time since the transformation. "Take Lord Brennan to the dungeons," KL ordered. "Anyone else who conspired with Blackwater will root out over the next few days. The rest of you, return to your quarters. The attack is over. The palace is secure." The nobles dispersed slowly, throwing glances at Alara that ranged from fear to fascination to barely concealed hostility. She could feel their calculations, their schemes already forming. She'd just become the most dangerous piece on a board she didn't even know she was playing on. When the courtyard finally emptied, Kael turned to her. "Can you walk?" "I think so." He helped her up, his hand steady at her elbow. Her legs were weak, her body exhausted from the shift, but she managed to stay upright. "Come on," he said. "We need to talk, privately." They walked through the damaged palace in silence. Servants were already working to repair the destruction, boarding up broken windows, clearing debris, treating the wounded. Everyone they passed bowed low. To Kael, certainly, but also to her. It felt wrong, uncomfortable, like wearing someone else's skin. Kael led her to his private chambers, a massive suite in the palace's highest tower. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud, and suddenly they were alone. Truly alone, for the first time since the cave. "Sit," Kael said, gesturing to a chair near the fireplace. "Before you fall down." She collapsed into it gratefully. He poured 2 glasses of something amber and strong-smelling, pressed one into her hands. "Drink. It'll help." She drank. The liquid burned going down, but he was right. It helped. The trembling eased. Her mind cleared slightly. Kyle sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" "Like my entire life was a lie." "Not a lie, a disguise." "Same thing." "No. A lie is meant to deceive. A disguise is meant to protect." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Your grandmother loved you. Everything she did to keep you safe. You understand that, right?" "I understand she made me believe I was nothing when I was actually—" She gestured helplessly. "Whatever this is. Powerful. You're powerful, Alara, more than you realize." "I don't feel powerful. I feel terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He echoed his own words from days ago. "But fear doesn't have to control you." She met his gaze. "What do you want from me?" "What do you mean?" "You defended me, protected me, made me yours in front of the entire court." She set down the glass. "Why? And don't say it's because I saved your life. That debt was paid the moment you brought me here." Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Do you know why my grandfather killed the Silvermanes?" "You said he feared them. He feared them because they were different. They didn't believe in the strict hierarchy that governed wolf society. In Silvermane packs, Omegas could challenge for leadership. Betas could refuse alpha commands. Power was earned through merit, not birth." His expression was distant, remembering. "My grandfather saw that as chaos, as threat to the natural order, so he destroyed them." "And you?" "I think he was wrong." Kael stood, moving to the window. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them, damaged but defiant. "I've spent my entire reign trying to reform the system, trying to give wolves opportunities based on ability instead of bloodline. But every step forward, the nobles push back. They want things to stay the way they've always been. Because change threatens their power." "Exactly." He turned back to her. "You represent that change, Alara. You're proof that the hierarchy isn't natural. It's artificial, maintained through lies and suppression and violence. Your existence challenges everything they believe." "So I'm a symbol." "You're more than that." He crossed to her, crouched down so they were eye level. "You're brilliant and brave and stubborn as hell. You saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. You stood up to nobles who wanted to destroy you. You transformed in front of an entire hostile court and didn't break." His hand came up to cup her face. "You're not a symbol. You're a force." Her breath caught. "Kael, I want you to stay. Not just in the palace, but at my side. Help me rebuild this kingdom into something better. Something that doesn't destroy wolves like us." "Wolves like us?" "Wolves who don't fit. Who see the cracks in the system and want to fix them instead of exploit them." His thumb brushed her cheekbone.
You could be my queen. The words hung in the air between them. Alara's heart hammered. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and smart and more resilient than anyone I've ever met. I know you challenge me in ways no one else dares. I know that when I thought I was dying in that ravine, the last thing I wanted was to die alone. And then you appeared. That's not a reason to make someone your queen.
No, but this is. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. I'm falling in love with you. Have been since you told that cave not to let me die. Since you stood in front of the court and called them cowards. Since you transformed into something magnificent and terrifying and refused to break. His forehead touched hers. So yes, I barely know you, but I want to, for as long as you'll let me. Tears burned in her eyes. This is insane. We've known each other 2 weeks.
13 days. But who's counting? Kael, I'm serious. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know politics or diplomacy or how to navigate court intrigue. I'll make mistakes. I'll probably make enemies. You'll be perfect. I won't. He kissed her.
Soft at first, tentative, giving her room to pull away. When she didn't, when she leaned into him instead, it deepened. His hand slid into her hair, her fingers curled into his shirt. The kiss tasted like smoke and blood and desperation, like two wolves who'd survived impossible odds and were choosing each other anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael rested his forehead against hers again.
Say yes, he whispered. Say you'll stay. Say you'll fight with me. Say you'll build something better. Alara closed her eyes. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too fast, too dangerous, too much, that she should run while she still could before she got in too deep. But she'd already made her choice. Had made it the moment she'd saved him in that ravine. The moment she'd trusted him enough to come here. The moment she'd stood in front of a hostile court and refused to be invisible. She was done running. Yes, she said, I'll stay. His smile was blinding. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I have conditions. Of course you do. I want the Omegas in your territories protected. Given opportunities. Not just tolerated, but valued. I want laws changed. I want the hierarchy reformed. And I want it in writing. Done. I'm serious, Kael. I won't be a figurehead. I won't smile and nod while nothing changes. I know. That's why I want you. He stood, pulling her up with him. We'll do it together. Tear down the old system and build something better. It won't be easy. Half the court will fight us every step of the way. But we'll do it anyway. You're insane. Probably, but so are you. He grinned. We'll be insane together. Despite everything, she laughed. Actual, genuine laughter that felt like breaking through ice into sunlight. A knock at the door interrupted them. Your Majesty, the commander requests your presence. We found something. Kael's expression sobered. What? Better if you see for yourself, sire. They followed the commander down to the dungeons where Lord Brennan sat in a cell, no longer defiant but pale and shaking. He's confessed, the commander said. Everything. The conspiracy with Blackwater. The plan to destabilize your rule and install a puppet king they could control. And he hesitated. There's more. Tell me. Show him, Brennan croaked from his cell. Show him what we found in the Silvermane records. A guard stepped forward, holding an old leather journal. The pages were yellowed with age, the writing faded but legible. Kael took it, flipped through, and went very still. What is it? Alara asked. He looked up at her, his expression complicated. Your grandmother's journal, from before she went into hiding. It details the massacre, how my grandfather's forces came in the night, how they killed everyone, men, women, children. His jaw tightened. It also details who led the attack. Your grandfather? No. Kael's voice was flat. My father. The words dropped like stones. He was only 16 at the time, still training, but he led the strike force that killed the Silvermane Alpha and his family. Personally. While my grandfather watched. Kael closed the journal. My father built his reputation on Silvermane blood. Alara felt cold. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve it to know. Because if we're going to do this, build something together, it has to be built on truth, not lies. He met her gaze. My family destroyed yours. I can't change that. Can't make it right. But I can acknowledge it. And I can spend the rest of my life trying to honor their memory by being better than my predecessors. She should hate him, should want revenge, should turn and walk away and never look back. Instead, she took the journal from his hands. Your family isn't you. You didn't choose what they did. You only choose what you do now. That's generous. No, it's practical. If I blamed you for your ancestors' sins, I'd have to blame myself for whatever the Silvermanes did before my grandmother. Guilt doesn't transfer through blood. She set the journal down. But responsibility for the future does. And you're right. We have to build this on truth. Kale nodded slowly. Then here's another truth. The nobles will never accept you easily. Some will plot against you. Some will try to kill you. Being my queen doesn't make you safe. It makes you a target. I was already a target the moment I transformed. This is different. This is choosing to stand in the line of fire. I know. She straightened her shoulders. But I'm done being invisible. Done being safe. If standing in the fire means changing things for wolves like me, then that's where I'll stand. His smile was fierce and proud. Then let's burn it all down. The next morning, Kael called an emergency assembly. Every noble in the capital was summoned to the throne room, along with representatives from every pack in the Eastern Territories. Word had spread about the attack, about Alara's transformation, about the conspiracy. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Alara stood beside Kael's throne, wearing formal robes in silver and white, Silvermane colors. A deliberate choice. A statement. The throne room filled quickly. Hundreds of wolves, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility to fear. She could feel their judgment pressing down on her like a physical weight, but she didn't flinch. Kael stood, and the room fell silent. 3 days ago, I was ambushed by Blackwater forces. They sought to kill me and destabilize our kingdom. They failed, thanks in large part to the wolf standing beside me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of you know her as Alara Vance, the Omega who saved my life. Others have heard the rumors that she's actually Silvermane born. Alpha bloodline. He paused. Both are true. She's Omega raised and Alpha blooded. And as of this moment, she's under my protection as my chosen queen. The room erupted. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. She has no political training. Silvermane blood is outlawed. Enough! Kael's voice cracked like thunder. The room silenced instantly. I am your king. My word is law. And I say Alara Silvermane is my queen. Anyone who challenges that challenges me directly. So please, his smile was sharp. Challenge me. I've been looking for an excuse to remind you all why I wear this crown. No one moved. Good. Now, as your queen, Alara will be implementing reforms, starting with protection laws for Omegas throughout the territories, mandatory education opportunities, fair treatment in all pack structures. He looked at her. Unless you'd like to add anything? This was it. The moment where she could stay silent and safe, or speak up and risk everything. She stepped forward. I would. I want breeding rights reform. Omegas should have the right to refuse bonding, to choose their own mates, to have autonomy over their own bodies. Gasps echoed through the hall. That violates centuries of tradition. Then tradition is wrong. Her voice was steady. I was treated as property my entire life, invisible until an alpha decided I was useful. I won't let that continue. Not in this kingdom, not while I have the power to stop it. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a voice called out. She's right. Heads turned. A young Omega stood, her hands trembling but her chin high. She's right. We deserve better. We deserve choice. Another Omega stood, then another, then betas. Then even some alphas, younger ones mostly, who'd seen the cracks in the system. One by one, wolves stood in support. Not all of them. Maybe not even half. But enough. Enough that it mattered. Enough that change became possible. Kael looked at her, and in his eyes she saw pride and hope, and something that looked a lot like love. The motion carries, he said. Reforms will begin immediately. Anyone who interferes answers to me and my queen. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Together, we rule. The words echoed through the throne room. And for the first time in her life, Elara felt like she belonged. Not because someone gave her permission, not because she'd earned the right through suffering, but because she'd chosen to claim her space in the world, and the world, slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably, was bending to accommodate her. Later, as the assembly dispersed and the nobles filed out with varying degrees of acceptance and resentment, Kyle pulled her aside. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "I was terrified." "Same thing, usually." He touched her face. "Thank you. For staying. For fighting. For being brave enough to stand beside me. Thank you for giving me a reason to." He kissed her then, in full view of anyone who cared to look. A claiming. A promise. A declaration that they were in this together, whatever came next. When they broke apart, Elara looked out over the city through the throne room windows. Somewhere out there were wolves who still wanted her dead, nobles who would plot against her, challenges that would test her in ways she couldn't imagine. But she wasn't alone anymore, wasn't invisible, wasn't the forgotten Omega at the edge of territory. She was Elara Silvermane, Queen of the Eastern Territories, Alpha born and rising. And she was just getting started. The first assassination attempt came 3 weeks later. Elara was in the council chamber reviewing territory disputes when the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the marble floor. A figure in black dropped through, blade already swinging for her throat. Her wolf reacted before her mind could process. She shifted mid-dodge, the transformation taking less than a heartbeat now. Her silver form blurred sideways. The assassin's blade cut air where her neck had been. 2 guards burst through the door, but Elara was faster. Her massive jaws clamped around the assassin's wrist. Bone crunched. The blade clattered to the floor. She threw him against the wall hard enough that the stone cracked. He slumped, unconscious. The guards secured him while Elara shifted back, breathing hard. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline, from the raw satisfaction of defending herself instead of running. "You all right?" Commander Thrace asked, appearing in the doorway with a dozen more guards. "Fine. Just annoyed." She pulled on the robe someone offered. "That's the 3rd one this month." "4th, actually. We intercepted one 2 nights ago before he reached the palace." "Wonderful." She looked at the unconscious assassin. "Let me guess. Hired by nobles who don't like the reforms." "Probably. We'll find out." Thrace's expression was grim. "Your Majesty, perhaps it's time to consider additional security measures." "I have additional security measures. They're called claws." She moved to the broken window, looking out over the city. "If I hide behind walls and guards, I'm telling them they've won, that I'm afraid. I won't do that." "Even if it costs your life?" "Especially then." She turned to face him. "My life only matters if I use it to change things. What's the point of surviving if nothing gets better?" Thrace studied her for a long moment. Then he bowed, deeper than protocol required. "You're a good queen, Your Majesty. Better than most of us deserve." "I'm really not. I'm just stubborn." "Same thing, usually." She smiled despite herself. "Where's Kyle?" "Meeting with the Outer Pack representatives. Should be done within the hour. Tell him I'm fine when he inevitably panics." "Will do." After Thrace left, Elara stood alone in the damaged council chamber. The assassin's blood stained the floor. The broken window let in cold autumn air. Everything was a mess. She'd never been happier. Because messy meant she was doing something, meant the old powers were scared enough to want her dead, meant change was happening whether they liked it or not. She just had to survive long enough to see it through. The door opened. She expected another guard, but it was Mira. Her old friend from Shadow Ridge looked different now. Clean clothes, better fed, standing straighter. Elara had sent for her 2 weeks ago, offered her a position in the palace. Mira had accepted immediately. "Heard there was excitement," Mira said dryly. "You couldn't just have a boring afternoon?" "Where's the fun in that?" "Most people define fun as not getting attacked by assassins." "I'm not most people." "No kidding." Mira crossed the room, carefully avoiding the blood. "You really okay?" "Yes, honestly. It was sloppy. He telegraphed the attack so badly I almost felt bad for him." "Maybe they're sending worse assassins on purpose, testing your reactions." That was an unsettling thought. "Thanks for that mental image. Just keeping you sharp." Mira's expression softened. You've changed, Elle. Grown into this. I barely recognize you. Good or bad? Good. Definitely good, she smiled. The Omega who couldn't meet anyone's eyes is now a queen who stares down hostile nobles and wins. It's kind of amazing to watch. I had good teachers. Alara moved away from the window. Speaking of which, how are the Omega education programs coming?
Better than expected. We've got 50 enrolled in the capital, another 100 in the outer territories. Reading, mathematics, basic healing. Some of the younger ones are even interested in combat training. Are the alphas cooperating? Some are. Others are dragging their feet. But after you personally intervened in that dispute last week, the one where that alpha was beating his bonded Omega, word spread fast. They know you're not playing around. Alara remembered that intervention. The alpha had been drunk, violent, claiming pack law gave him the right to discipline his mate however he wanted. She'd walked into his den, transformed in front of him, and explained very clearly that pack law now answered to her law. And her law said anyone who raised a hand to their mate would answer to her personally. He'd prostrated himself and begged forgiveness. She'd granted it, once, with the understanding that there wouldn't be a second chance.
Good, she said. Fear isn't ideal, but I'll take it over complacency. You sound like Kael. He's rubbing off on me. It's horrifying. Mira laughed. Then her expression grew serious. Elle, can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? Truly. Because this life, the constant threats, the political maneuvering, the pressure, it's not what you dreamed of when we were in Shadow Ridge. I didn't dream of anything in Shadow Ridge. I just survived. Alara moved to the council table, tracing the carved map of the territories. Here, I'm actually living, making choices that matter, changing things for wolves who need it. Is it hard? Yes. Dangerous? Absolutely. But it's mine. My choice. My fight. She looked up. So yes, I'm happy. Terrified and exhausted and constantly looking over my shoulder, but happy. Then I'm happy for you. What about you? How are you adjusting?
Better than I expected. It's strange having options. Being able to say no. Being asked what I want instead of told. Mira's voice wavered slightly. I didn't realize how small my life was until I left it. You were never small. The world just tried to make you think you were. Says the woman who literally transformed into a giant wolf and made nobles bow. That was mostly accidental. Sure it was. They were still laughing when Kael arrived, wild-eyed and frantic. He took one look at the broken window, the blood, Alara standing there unharmed, and crossed the room in 3 strides. You're okay. Not a question, a confirmation, like he needed to say it out loud to believe it. I'm fine. He was sloppy. I handled it. You shouldn't have to handle assassins alone. I wasn't alone. I had guards. She touched his face. Breathe. I'm fine. He pulled her into his arms, holding tight. She felt his heart hammering against hers, felt the fear he was trying so hard to control. One of these days, he said quietly, one of them is going to get lucky. Maybe, but not today. He pulled back to look at her. You're too calm about this. What do you want me to do? Panic? Hide? That's not who I am. I know. It's one of the things I love about you. It's also the thing that's going to give me a heart attack. He glanced at Mira. Thank you for being here. Of course, Your Majesty. Mira bowed and excused herself, leaving them alone. Kael guided Alara away from the broken window toward the far side of the chamber. The outer pack representatives are getting restless. They want to meet you formally. Assess whether the rumors about the Silvermane Queen are true. Which rumors? That I'm secretly plotting to overthrow you? That I'm controlling your mind? That I sacrifice nobles under the full moon? All of the above, probably. His mouth quirked. Personally, I'm partial to the mind control one. Very dramatic. I'll add it to my resume. There's going to be a formal gathering in 2 weeks. Every pack alpha in the Eastern Territories. It's unavoidable. We do it annually to address grievances and renew alliances. But this year, with everything that's happened, he trailed off. They're going to challenge me. Some will, the older traditionalists especially. They see you as a threat to their way of life. He took her hands.
I can postpone it. Give you more time to prepare.
No, let them come. Let them see what they're dealing with. She squeezed his fingers. I'm tired of hiding, tired of waiting for permission to exist. If they want to challenge me, they can do it to my face. His gray eyes searched hers. You understand what you're inviting. If an alpha formally challenges you and you refuse, you look weak. But if you accept and lose, I won't lose. Alara, see, I won't. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. I've spent my entire life being underestimated, being dismissed. Every wolf who challenges me will make that same mistake. They'll see omega raised and assume weakness. They'll see female and assume vulnerability. She smiled, sharp and dangerous. They'll be wrong. Kale studied her face, then pulled her close and kissed her forehead. You're magnificent and terrifying, and I love you. Love you too. Even when you're being overprotective. I can't help it. You're my queen, my mate, my... He paused. Actually, we should probably formalize that last part. Formalize what? The mating bond. We've been acting like bonded mates, but we haven't completed the ritual. Which means technically, you could still be challenged for by other alphas. Alara's stomach dropped. Please tell me you're joking. I wish I was. Ancient law. Any unbonded alpha female can be claimed by a challenger who defeats her in combat. It hasn't been invoked in decades, but with the gathering coming up, someone will definitely try. So what do we do? Bond. Officially. Before the gathering. He touched her face. I was going to do this more romantically, but given the circumstances, Alara Silvermane, will you be my bonded mate? My queen, not just in title, but in blood and soul? Her breath caught. This wasn't how she'd imagined this moment. Standing in a damaged council chamber, covered in another wolf's blood, discussing assassination attempts and political challenges. But somehow, it was perfect. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. The bonding ceremony happened 3 days later. Traditionally, it would have been a massive public affair with hundreds of witnesses. But given the security concerns and the political tensions, they kept it small. Just the inner council, a handful of trusted guards, and Mira. They stood in the palace garden at dawn, the sun just breaking over the eastern mountains. A priestess from the old traditions, one of the few who remembered Silvermane customs, officiated. The bonding of alpha to alpha is rare, the priestess said, her voice carrying in the quiet morning air. A union of equals. Not dominance, but partnership. Not possession, but choice. Kael took Alara's hands. They'd both shifted to wolf form for this part. Tradition demanded it. His dark gray wolf was massive, scarred, powerful. Her silver form was equally imposing, her fur catching the dawn light like captured starlight. The priestess continued. Do you, Kael Draven, Alpha King of the Eastern Territories, choose this wolf as your mate? To stand beside her in battle and in peace? To honor her strength and protect her vulnerabilities? To bind your life to hers until death claims you both? I do, Kael said, the words rumbling from his wolf's chest. Do you, Alara Silvermane, last of your bloodline and queen of these lands, choose this wolf as your mate? To stand beside him in battle and in peace? To honor his strength and protect his vulnerabilities? To bind your life to his until death claims you both? I do. Then by blood and bone, by moon and earth, I bind you. The priestess drew a silver blade across her palm, let 3 drops of blood fall to the ground. Sealed in the old ways, witnessed by pack and land. May your bond be unbreakable. The magic, and it was magic, ancient and primal, slammed into Alara like a physical force. She felt Kael in her mind, her heart, her very soul. Felt his presence like a second heartbeat. Felt his strength wrapping around hers, supporting, complementing. Felt whole in a way she'd never experienced. They shifted back to human form, still holding hands, still staring at each other in wonder. That was... Alara couldn't find words. Intense, Kael finished. Yes, the priestess smiled. The bond between 2 alphas is the strongest there is. You'll feel each other's emotions, sense each other's locations, share strength in battle, but it also means you'll feel each other's pain, each other's fear. There's no hiding anymore. Good, Alara said. I'm tired of hiding.
The witnesses approached to offer congratulations. Mira was crying openly. Commander Thrace looked pleased. Even the usually stoic council members seemed genuinely happy. For one morning, politics and danger and plots faded away. For one morning, Elara was just a woman who'd bonded with the wolf she loved. But the peace couldn't last. The gathering arrived too quickly. Alphas from every corner of the Eastern Territories descended on the capital. Some came with genuine curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. All of them wanted to see the Silvermane Queen who'd disrupted their comfortable hierarchy. The main gathering hall was packed. 200 alphas, their betas, their advisors. The air was thick with competing scents and barely restrained aggression. Elara stood beside Kael's throne, wearing formal robes in Silvermane silver. She'd learned to hold her wolf form close to the surface now, ready to transform at a moment's notice. The bond with Kael hummed in her chest, steady and reassuring. "Let them posture," Kael murmured through the bond. "You're stronger than any of them." "I know, doesn't make this less terrifying. Fear keeps you sharp. You need new platitudes." His mental laugh warmed her. "Never." The gathering began with formal grievances and territory disputes, boring but necessary. Elara paid attention, learning the political landscape, identifying allies and enemies. Then came the moment she'd been dreading. An older alpha stood from the southern delegation, Alpha Marcus of the Ironwood Pack, gray-bearded, scarred, his posture radiating old-world authority. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying easily, "I have a question for your queen." The pause before queen was deliberate, an insult. "Ask it," Kael said coldly. "Lady Silvermane, you claim to be Alpha-born, yet you were raised Omega, lived as Omega for 23 years. Tell me." Marcus's smile was cruel. "How can we trust that you're truly Alpha, that this isn't some elaborate deception, perhaps a talented Omega playing dress-up?" The hall went silent. Elara felt rage flash through the bond from Kael, but she squeezed his hand, held him back. "Are you questioning my bloodline?" she asked, her voice steady. "I'm questioning whether bloodline matters when behavior and upbringing suggest otherwise. You have no alpha training, no combat experience, no leadership history." Marcus spread his hands. "You're a healer who happened to be in the right place at the right time. That doesn't make you queen material." "Then what would?" "Proof. Real proof. Not just a convenient transformation witnessed by the king's loyalists." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, other alphas nodding. This had been planned, coordinated. "You want proof?" Elara stepped forward, away from Kael's throne. "What kind?" Marcus smiled. "Combat trial, old tradition. If you're truly alpha, prove it. Fight someone of alpha blood. If you win, no one questions your legitimacy again. If you lose," he shrugged, "then we'll know the truth." "And who would I fight?" "Me." The hall erupted. This was exactly what the traditionalists wanted, a chance to put the upstart Omega in her place, to prove that birth mattered more than transformation. Through the bond, Elara felt Kael's fury. "Don't do this. It's a trap. Marcus is a veteran fighter with 40 years of combat experience." "I know." "Then refuse. There's no shame in—" "There's every shame in it. If I refuse, I prove them right, that I'm not really alpha, that I'm just playing dress-up." She looked at him, and through the bond, she let him feel her certainty. "I can do this. Trust me." The plea in those two words must have reached him, because after a moment Kael nodded. "I trust you. Always." He stood, addressing the hall. "Lady Elara accepts the challenge, combat trial. First to yield or first blood. Witnessed by the gathering." His voice was ice. "And when she wins, every alpha here will acknowledge her legitimacy. No more questions, no more challenges. That's my terms." "Agreed," Marcus said, already moving to the center of the hall. A space cleared. Alphas pressed back against the walls, eager for blood, eager to see how this played out. Elara walked to the center, facing Marcus across 20 feet of open floor. Her heart hammered, but her mind was clear. She'd been preparing for this moment since the first assassination attempt, since the first hostile glare in the corridors, since she'd decided to stop hiding and start fighting. "Anytime you want to yield," Marcus said mockingly. "I understand if you're having second thoughts." "No second thoughts." She shifted,
The transformation was instantaneous now, fluid as breathing. One moment human, the next her massive silver wolf form towering over the gathered alphas. Marcus shifted too. His wolf was battle-scarred, dark brown, experienced, but smaller than hers. That realization flickered through his eyes, surprise, recalculation, before the fight began. He lunged first, going for her throat, a classic alpha move designed to establish dominance quickly. Alara had spent weeks studying with Commander Thrace, learning combat forms her grandmother had never taught her. She sidestepped, used Marcus's momentum against him, slammed her shoulder into his ribs as he passed. He stumbled but recovered quickly, circled, lunged again. They clashed in the center of the hall, teeth and claws and raw strength. Marcus fought with decades of experience, every move calculated and efficient. But Alara fought with something else, with the rage of 23 years of invisibility, with the memory of laughter at the harvest gathering, with the determination to prove that birth didn't determine worth. She fought like she had nothing left to lose, because in many ways she didn't. Marcus went for her legs, trying to cripple her. She leaped, came down on his back, drove him to the ground. He rolled, dislodged her, snapped at her face. His teeth caught her shoulder, drawing blood. First blood. Technically, he'd won, but Alara didn't yield. She drove forward, ignoring the pain, and got her jaws around his throat. Not enough to crush, just enough to hold, enough to prove she could kill him if she wanted. "Yield," she growled. Marcus thrashed, tried to break free, but she'd positioned perfectly, her weight and leverage making escape impossible. "Yield or die. Your choice." For a long moment, Marcus fought, pride and ego warring with survival instinct. Then his body went limp. Submission. Alara released him and stepped back. Both of them shifted to human form, breathing hard, bloodied. "First blood was mine," Marcus said, wiping his mouth. "But the victory is yours. You fight like Alpha-born." He bowed, deep and genuine. "I acknowledge your legitimacy, Queen Alara." The hall was silent. Then, one by one, the other alphas bowed. Some reluctantly, some with genuine respect. But all of them bowed. Alara stood in the center of the hall, covered in blood and sweat, and felt the weight of their acknowledgement settle over her like a crown. She'd done it, proven herself, claimed her place not through birthright or luck, but through sheer determination and will. Kale crossed to her, his expression fierce and proud. That was incredible. That was terrifying. Same thing. He pulled her close, not caring about the blood or the watching alphas. "You're magnificent, and mine." "Yours," she agreed, "and you're mine." The gathering continued for 3 more days, but the tone had shifted. Alphas who'd been hostile now approached with cautious respect. Territory disputes that had seemed intractable suddenly found solutions. Alliances formed. And through it all, Alara worked. Negotiating, listening, learning, pushing her reforms forward inch by careful inch. By the time the gathering ended, she'd secured agreements from 40 packs to implement Omega education programs. 20 had agreed to breeding rights reforms. 10 were piloting new governance structures that gave voice to betas and omegas in pack decisions. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was progress. 2 months later, Alara stood in the throne room with Kael, reviewing reports from the outer territories. The reforms were working, slowly, with resistance, but working. Omega literacy rates were climbing. Abuse reports were down. Wolves who'd been invisible their entire lives were starting to find their voices. "We did it," Kael said quietly. "You did it." "We're doing it," she corrected. "This isn't finished. Won't be finished in our lifetime, probably. But we started it." "That's enough." "Is it? It has to be. We can't fix everything. We can just make things better than we found them." He pulled her close. "And you have. You've made things immeasurably better." She leaned into him, feeling the bond pulse warm and steady between them. "I got a letter today. From Shadow Ridge." "Yeah?" "From Mira's sister. She says wolves are talking about the reforms, about the Omega Queen who changed everything. Some of the younger Omegas are asking questions, demanding better treatment." Alara smiled. "They're using my name like a threat. Queen Alara wouldn't tolerate this. It's working." "How does that feel?" "Surreal. Terrifying. Perfect." She looked up at him. Thank you for seeing something in me when I couldn't see it myself, for giving me a chance, for standing beside me through all of this. I should be thanking you. You saved my life, then you saved my kingdom." He kissed her softly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I'm stubborn and reckless and constantly attracting assassins, especially because of that." They stood together in the throne room, two wolves who shouldn't have survived, who'd found each other in a ravine and built a kingdom on the ruins of the old order. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them. Inside, the bond hummed steady and true. Alara thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, forgotten, convinced she was nothing. That girl would never believe where she'd ended up, but she'd gotten here anyway, through pain and transformation and sheer stubborn refusal to stay broken. "What are you thinking?" Kyle asked. "That I'm glad I saved you that night." "Me too. And that if anyone had told me a year ago that I'd be queen, bonded to an alpha king, reforming an entire kingdom's power structure, I'd have thought they were insane." "You are insane. That's why it worked." She laughed. "Fair point." A knock at the door interrupted them. Commander Thrace entered, looking pleased. "Your Majesties, delegation from the Western Territories. They want to discuss implementing your reforms in their region. They've heard the reports and—" He smiled. "They want Queen Alara to personally oversee the transition." "See," Kyle said, "you're a force now. They're afraid not to change because they know you'll make them." "Good," Alara said. "Fear is better than complacency." She took Kyle's hand and they walked toward the door together, toward more work, more challenges, more fights to make the world better than they'd found it. But this time, Alara walked with her head high and her wolf close to the surface. This time, she walked as queen, as alpha, as someone who'd survived being broken and used that strength to rebuild herself into something unbreakable. She'd been the Omega nobody wanted, the wolf they'd laughed at, the girl who'd run into the wilderness with nothing but desperation and hope. Now she was the queen who changed everything, and she was just getting started. In the years that followed, the reforms spread. Omega rights became standard across the Eastern Territories. Education programs flourished. Wolves who'd been invisible their entire lives found opportunities, found voices, found power. There were setbacks, resistance. More assassination attempts that Alara fought off with increasing skill. Political battles that lasted months. Nobles who would never fully accept the new order. But slowly, steadily, the world changed. And at the center of it all stood Alara and Kyle. Not as king and subordinate, but as equals, as partners. As two wolves who'd found each other in the darkness and used that light to burn down the old world and build something better. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of the Eastern Territories, they would point to the night Alara Silvermane transformed in the courtyard as the moment everything changed. But Alara knew better. The moment everything changed was earlier, in a cave. When a broken Omega looked at a dying king and made a choice to show mercy, to offer help, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world could be different. That choice had changed everything, and she would spend the rest of her life honoring it,